From On the Road, Jack Kerouac. The girls came down and we started out on our big night, once more pushing the car down the street. "Let's go," cried Dean. We jumped in the back seat and clanked to the little Harlem on Folsom Street. Out we jumped in the warm, mad night, hearing a wild Tenorman's bawling horn across the way and hands clapping to the beat and folks yelling, "Go, go, go." Dean was already racing across the street with his thumb in the air, yelling, "Blow, man, blow." A bunch of colored men in Saturday night suits were whooping it up out front. It was a sawdust saloon with a small bandstand in which the fellows huddled with their hats on, blowing over the people's heads. A crazy place. Crazy floppy women wandered around, sometimes in their bathrobes, bottles clinked in alleys. In the back of the joint, in the dark corridor, scores of men and women stood against the wall drinking wine, spodioti, and spitting at the stars. Wine and whiskey. The beheaded Tenorman was blowing at the peak of a wonderfully satisfactory free idea, a rising and falling riff, and he blasted along to the rolling crash of the butt-scarred drums, hammered by a big brute of black with a bull neck who didn't give a damn about anything but punishing his busted tubs. Crash, crash, rattle-de-boom, crash, and uproars of music, and the Tenorman had it, and everybody knew he had it. Dean was clutching his head in the crowd, and it was a mad crowd. They were urging that Tenorman to hold it and keep it with cries and wild eyes, and he was rising himself from a crouch and going down again with his horn and looping it up in a clear cry above the furor. A 6-foot skinny Negro woman was rolling her bones at the man's hornbill, and he just jabbed at her and laughed. Everybody was rocking and roaring. Galatea and Marie, with beer in their hands, were standing on their chairs, shaking and jumping. Groups of colored guys stumbled in from the street, falling over one another. "Stay with it, man," roared a man with a foghorn voice, and let out a big groan that must have been heard clear out in Sacramento. "Whew," said Dean. He was rubbing his chest, his belly, the sweat splashed from his face. Boom, kick. That drummer was kicking his drums down the cellar and rolling the beat upstairs with murderous sticks. Rattly boom, rattly boom. A big fat man was jumping on the platform, making it sag and creak. The pianist was pounding the keys with spread-eagle fingers, pounding out chords that shuddered the piano and every timber clink and wire boing. The Tenorman jumped down from the platform and stood in the crowd, blowing around. His hat was over his eyes. Somebody pushed it back for him. He just hauled back, stamped his foot, and blew down a hoarse, bawling blast and drew breath and raised a horn and blew high, wide, and screaming into the night. Dean was directly in front of him, his face lowered to the bell of the horn, clapping his hands, pouring sweat on the man's keys. And the man noticed, and he laughed in his horn. A long, quavering, crazy laugh, and everybody else laughed, and they rocked, and finally the Tenorman decided to blow his top and crouched down and held a note in high C for a long time as everything else crashed along and the cries increased, and I thought the cops would come swarming from the nearest precinct. Dean was in a trance. The Tenorman's eyes were fixed straight on him. He had a madman who not only understood but cared and wanted to understand more and much more than there was. And they began dueling for this. Everything came out of the horn. No more phrases, just cries, and down to beep and up to clinkers and over to sideways echoing horn sounds. Upside down, horizontal, 30 degrees, and finally he fell back in somebody's arms and gave up, and everybody pushed around and yelled. Yeah, he sure blowed that one. Dean, exhausted, wiped himself down with his handkerchief. So in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken-down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and since all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the west coast, and all that road going, all the people dreaming in the immensity of it, and in Iowa, I know by now the children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight, the stars will be out, and you know that God is Pooh Bear. The evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dims on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that blesses the earth, darkens all rivers, cups the peaks and folds the final shore in, and nobody knows what's going to happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. I think of Dean Moriarty, I think of old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. I think of Dean Moriarty.